Hello folks, so here we have a generalised teaching model of a pliosaur, and I'm going to point out some of the anatomical details for you, starting with the skull and then describing the rest of the body. So on the skull, we're going to look first of all at the rostral bones, so that's this front part, the snout part. Then we're going to look at the bones of the skull roof, and then I'll also look at the bones of the lower jaw. So right at the front here, we have the premaxilla. So the premaxilla is the anteriormost bone which carries these teeth, the anterior teeth of the pliosaur. Its suture projects backwards up to and maybe touching the nostrils here. And below that, here, the other tooth-bearing element of the rostrum is called the maxilla. So we have the premaxilla and the maxilla. We have these two nostrils right here, and behind them, or just above and behind, we have the frontal bone. So frontal bone here and the frontal bone here. Moving further back, so we have moving through the maxilla to this suture here, we have the parietal bone. So the parietal bone, which rises into a crest, and there's the parietal foramen there, the third eye. It rises to a crest and contacts at the back the squamosals. So there's two squamosals. They meet at the very back of the skull in a bulb. It's not really shown here, but most pliosaurs will have a squamosal bulb right there, sort of small projection going backwards. And the squamosal provides the sort of the back of the skull and has projections forwards here and here. These two large openings here and here are the temporal fenestrae. And these two large openings, or not quite so large openings, are the eye orbits. The bones around the eye orbits include, here we have the lacrimal, which has got a very faint suture just here on the model. We have the jugal behind it. We have the prefrontal in front of it, just there. We have what's called the palpebral, which is a sort of an extra neomorphic, so it's a new element that arose for the pliosaurs. It seems to be something which they all have. We have the postfrontal there, and this bar here is the postorbital bar. So I think that covers all the periorbital bones. If we look through the temporal fenestrum, we actually see some of the bones which make up the palate of the pliosaur, the palatal area. And these here, these projections, one going to this side and one going to the other side, these are the posterior projections of the pterygoid bone. What else to show? Oh yes, the articulations here with the lower jaw are called the quadrate bones. So that's here. They're not very well defined in this model, but that is a quadrate, and there's another quadrate on the other side. If we then move to the lower jaw, that's the dentary. It's the part that bears the teeth on that side, and similarly it's shown here as well. It has a suture around here, if I can see it properly. It's around there somewhere. There it is, yes. Beneath this, in the posterior part of the dentary, of the mandible, we have the angular and the surangular, angular and surangular on that side too, and we have the articular back here, which connects with the quadrate of the upper skull. And we have this little projection towards the back. It's called the retroarticular process. One other bone that we've never found in the larger pliosaur, meaning the Pliosaurus clade, but which there is a suggestion that they might be there, is an eye bone called the sclerotic ring. The sclerotic ring, it's something that birds have, some birds have. It's a set of small bones which protect the eye itself. In some of the earlier specimens, I think in Pelaneustes, such a structure has been found. So in the Oxford clay pliosaurs, there is a suggestion that at least some of them had these sclerotic rings. Ichthyosaurs, another clade of marine reptiles, certainly had them. So there's a chance that pliosaurs might have had them as well, but we've never found them. Maybe they're just too fragile and they're never preserved. Moving now to the neck vertebrae, the cervical vertebrae. We have maybe 18 of them in pliosaurs, the larger pliosaurs. So even though we call them short-necked creatures, perhaps their necks aren't all that short. Right at the front of the cervical vertebrae, we have the atlas and the axis, which connect the vertebral column to the brain case through what is called the occipital condyle. One other thing perhaps I should have mentioned, looking through the temporal fenestrum on this side, we can see a small bone here which attaches the brain case to the posterior projection of the pterygoid. That's this bone here. That's called the exoccipital opistotic, and it is supporting the brain case against the palate. Just there. So, atlas and axis are right at the front of the cervical vertebrae. Then we have maybe 18 of those. They are quite short vertebrae, so in length, antero-posteriorly. They have lateral processes, which I'm just putting my pencil across here, and they have the neural arches, which are the dorsal processes, which are, in fact, have dorsal processes here, which presumably acted as muscle attachment for the neck muscles. Moving further back, here at this point we have a transition from the cervical vertebrae to the dorsal vertebrae, and usually the transition is actually smoother than it's shown here, with the lateral processes rising up, and we call those the vertebrae that have that movement the pectoral vertebrae. So we have a number of vertebrae making up the thoracic portion of the pliosaur, with many ribs, all producing a very beautiful aesthetically pleasing movement, from quite short to expanding around the middle to quite long ribs there, and getting gradually shorter again as we go towards the back. Below those, on the underside, the ventral side of the pliosaur, we have another set of ribs called the gastral ribs, or the gastralia, and they provide a sort of supportive basket for the thoracic cavity of these animals, as well as the plesiosaurs too. They had some too. On the shoulder girdle, we have the scapula, two scapulae, and below that, a flat plate called the coracoid. So a triradiate scapula and a flat coracoid, or two flat coracoids. These provide a joint, an articulation for the forelimbs on both sides too. Moving further back towards the posterior region, we have also a pelvic girdle, which consists of a pubis or two pubic bones, an ischium, that's this bone here, also a flattish and long bone, and then an ilium, which is this bone, which in this model is connecting the joint to the vertebral column. I didn't mention the tail, which in this model seems to be rather long. I don't actually know that we know for sure how many vertebrae were in a pliosaur tail, but I think it might have been fewer than this model shows. However, we're not sure of that, so give it the benefit of the doubt. If we then go to the limbs, we have the forelimbs, The forelimb consists of the humerus, we have the radius and the ulna, we have the carpals or the wrist bones, the metacarpals, and the phalanges. And there are numerous phalanges on these animals. They've obviously multiplied to produce long fin-like structures. So that's the forelimb. The hind limb, similarly, it has a femur, like we do, like all the tetrapods have femora, with the exception of cetaceans and snakes that have lost them. And we have the femur, we have the tibia and fibula, we have also the tarsals, metatarsals, and the phalanges on the toes, on the posterior limb. So I think that just about covers the main portions of the skeleton. And thank you very much for listening.